Hello there, and welcome to the Second Life Book Club. My name is Draxtor Dupre, and today on the show is Nick Mamatas, prolific writer of short and long speculative fiction, editor of anthologies, and for a while editing Japanese sci-fi in translation, although reportedly he doesn't like translation. We'll talk about that. Because the question is, should we all learn 20 languages or not read anything from other cultures? What I also learned about Nick when I dove into his work is that he made money once by ghostwriting term papers. Ghostwriting term papers. And also, that's probably a fact that a lot of people may know about him is that he is, I don't know if he's obsessed with H.P. Lovecraft, but we'll ask him about that. Nick, I will introduce you properly in a second, but I need to do quick housekeeping notes because it's a new year. Happy 2021. This is the first show of this year, and 2021 is fully booked. If you have an author that you would like to recommend as a guest, please do email me, slbookclub@draxtor.com. We'll see if we can shuffle things around or put a panel together. The show is produced by Strawberry Linden and myself. We stream on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. We have an audience of a combined average of 3,000 viewers every single week. So I like to believe that maybe some of these people are lapsed readers that stumble across the stream and then get into books. So that will be awesome. Likewise, if you bump into people in world here on Book Club Island, we have 200 to 300 people come through here every single day. If you bump into them, befriend them, recommend a book, be nice. There's a lot of newbies here. Now, big thanks to Arieto Kiori, Arden Schwartzman, Marianne McCann, AJ McDowell, and Solus. They all contribute to the customization of the island, and they make special props. Kralos customizes the avatars, and Silas Merlin creates avatars from scratch. Now, live on the island as of last week is the Floating Gallery of Authors. We had over 50 authors come through last year since we started this in April last year. And there's an awesome gallery that Arieto built, and you can walk across it. You can click on the links, shoots you to the author's website, find more information. There's also a link to the original YouTube live stream. Yeah, that's about it. Now let's welcome our esteemed guest. Nick, how are you?
All right, how are you?
Very good. Are you content with your avatar's looks? You have a nice COVID mask and everything.
Yeah.
You were okay with kind of a replica of your real life self. You didn't feel tempted to get a total Cthulhu monster.
Well, I never wear the sweater, so that was a new thing for me.
Well, the sweater was from wardrobe, you know. You have to I'll fire them if is it okay for me to say that you're obsessed with H.P. Lovecraft?
I would say fascinated.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinated more than obsessed. I know people who are obsessive who have literally moved to Providence to be closer to his hometown and to his life, and who basically don't read anything else. I know one person who has, must have hundreds and hundreds of Lovecraftian titles and collections of letters. I don't go that far. Those people are obsessed. I'm just fascinated.
Have you ever met someone who has a H.P. Lovecraft tattoo?
Many people.
Oh, like off his face?
Obsessed. People got tattoos for trivial reasons, His face, of Cthulhu, of little slogans.
Yeah.
We're
gonna get
into all that business. Yeah.
We're gonna get into Lovecraft a little bit later in the show because you have a absolute excellent anthology out that is just out. It's called Wonder and Glory Forever. It's here on the table. And about the not obsessed business, Nick, I'm sorry to break it to you, but you wrote a book that says I Am Providence by Nick Mamatas is also here on the table. And if people move around here on the table, they see all these books. In the Wonder and Glory Forever, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and we'll hear excerpts as well. There's a fascinating group of stories in there by amazingly talented authors who riff on Lovecraft themes. And what also I did not know is that there is a subgenre of sort of fan fiction where Lovecraft is the hero in these stories and fights against his own monsters. But we're going to do this in the middle of the show. I'm also going to find out who Lovecraft is. Maybe some people here don't even know who he is, what his significance is, what the big problem is with the guy, because there are quite a few severe problems with him as a person. But first, I wanted to ask you, which we ask almost every author, how is COVID treating you in relation to your creativity? Is it challenging to get up in the morning to write with the anxiety that the COVID uncertainty produces?
Not really. Not because I've been very lucky. I haven't gotten COVID. My son hasn't gotten COVID. My former wife, with whom I co-parent, my son hasn't gotten COVID. My parents haven't gotten COVID. My sister's not gotten COVID. I was one of the people who sort of benefited from unemployment payments, from my day job closing down for a while and then having limited hours. So financially, I was actually a little better off than I was previously due to COVID. So because of this, extreme good luck.
And you're also a writer, so you like to be alone and removed from society, right?
Exactly. And before I moved to California, I was working from home all the time as a full-time freelancer. So just going back to that was fine with me.
Is the craziness of the current moment, and again, some people say, well, how did it get this crazy? And I always reply, well, you must have not been paying attention. There's really like a very, very sort of clear line, but the madness of sort of everybody making up their own reality. I mean, in that regard, does that make it harder to come up with stories?
No. Makes it easier. In fact, one of the things that we're doing now is about that. But even as we're speaking now, there was somebody in the Senate chamber, a protester. They'd broken into the Capitol building. The Congress has cleared the notes, and someone was standing in Congress, just normal, not a normal person, but a random person, shouting, "Trump won the election. Where's Pence now? Show yourself." That's what's happening in the Senate chambers here in the U.S. right this second.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. As a satirist, you have such a wonderful satirical tone, and we're gonna get into Move Underground later. Your debut novel, which is awesome, and all this. Does that not make it harder, that craziness, to come up with crazy protagonists and plot lines to satirize?
No, I'm just a realist. Instead of a satirist, a contemporary realist, like a Jonathan Franzen type. Mm-hmm. So reality's caught up with me, but that just means I changed my category.
So you're not writing speculative fiction anymore. You're writing reality.
That's right, exactly. Yeah, just plain old realism. Yeah,
I understand. So it's all about rebranding yourself, and then we're good to go.
Exactly.
So now the Planet Breaker Sun, which I literally just finished an hour ago, is coming out from PM Press on January 21st, and it's a mix of stories. There's an older one which is awesome. It's called Ring 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 Ring. Maybe it's called Ring 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 3 times. Oh, Nick disappeared for me. Where did he go?
Oh, hang on 1 second.
Uh-oh.
1 second. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, but I vanished, huh? Okay.
Oh my God! You vanished into the land of Cthulhu.
As long as you can still hear me, it's fine. I will tell you that my computer is extremely old and extremely slow. I'm not a gamer. The last thing I did like this, Tiny Muds, back in the 1990s.
Right.
So right now I see a blank screen and a spinning wheel, and I presume I'll wake back up in a second here if I press a couple buttons and that may reappear. But as long as you can hear me, that's fine, I think.
Right. No, but so what that means is you're probably in the process of crashing. You can close it and come back, and in the meantime, I'm going to riff a little bit, and we also have a reading from Planet Breaker Sun. But as
let's hang on 1 second here, because I don't think I'm crashing. I think my computer went to sleep while I was talking to you. Because nothing else.
We're pretty sure you are, because that's the normal trajectory.
Oh,
So,
yeah?
but since you're still on
Yeah.
on voice,
Mhm.
let me ask you, and then when you disappear, we'll go to the pre-prepared reading, because I hired a drone to read from your story. What I learned in the Planet Breaker Sun is that you were a term paper writer, a ghost writer for term papers, and it's quite shocking how people get into college with those types of deficiencies. Can you just briefly summarize how you got into that, and what were those term papers about? I mean, what's
Well, I got
subjects?
into it the weird way. The classic, when I was a kid, they'd always say you can't find a job as a writer in the newspapers, in the classified ads. But in fact, that's what I did. I was reading the Village Voice, and it said writers wanted all sorts of subjects: economics, literature. I said, "Oh, that sounds good." It was a term paper mill. I really needed some money, and so I said, "I'll do it." And I wrote a lot of term papers when I was in college and in grad school, so I knew how to write a term paper. And I did it for a lot of years. Too many years, really. I spent too much time doing it because it was fast money. It's not good money, but it's fast money, so that sort of keeps you on the hook.
But you were also
And
really fast, because as you're describing, this is really quite astonishing. I mean, you plow through these books, but you were also very efficient, because you understood the structure of these term papers, and it's really not about understanding this knowledge or really doing research. It's really just sort of, I mean, I don't want to completely reduce it to kind of cut and paste, right? But there's a lot. If you understand how to cut and paste quotes and assemble those freely available information bits in the right order and write in good English, then you're ready to go, right?
that's pretty much it. And there's like an underlying set of principles. A lot of undergraduate education is basically boils down to, does essence precede existence, or the other way around? Is the collective more important, or is the individual more important? Is culture prominent over politics, or is politics prominent over culture? All these social sciences and humanities have the same kind of sets of arguments. And so you just need to figure out what the professor's side is, and either give him his version, this press's own version, or a sophisticated version of that which he disagrees with. But of course, once you've written 5 term papers on Plato, the 6th one's very easy, or 10 term papers on Hamlet, the 11th one is pretty easy.
But you have to still switch it around a little bit, right? I mean, you just
Of course,
switch it,
yeah.
And you mentioned, and this is really fascinating, and you mentioned something that that hit very close to home for me, because my wife is American and she's learning German, and she went back to school. She has one more year, and the German at the university level is, the requirements are fairly high. She's doing a great job, but one of her professors said to her, with the way you speak German, you will never be able to become a sociologist. And there were just like a few little mistakes here and there, and she challenged him on that. But you write in your essay that the tragic client, the clients that you had that you felt really sad for, were highly accomplished academics from other countries who came to the U.S., but just were not able to speak English that well.
And certainly, I was living in New York and New Jersey at the time, and there was a large number of relatively recent immigrants from former Soviet countries, the former Soviet Union and related countries, and many of them again were highly educated, in physics and other sciences, and they were driving cabs here in the United States, or doing other jobs that were relatively easy to get, and hoping to re-credential themselves. And many of them would just hand me the work. They said, well, here's my research. I did the research. I understand what's going on. I just need it to be shaped up. So that was actually the most ethical kind of writing as well, in that it was really just editing for them. Yeah.
Right, because these people, deserve to be to have a career in their field with their knowledge. And I mean, I personally think it's quite unfair to have these requirements or the burden, the hurdle be the language if you
Mm-hmm.
understand the subject matter, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, Nick, I'm going to ask you to please relog now because we're going to go to the reading that gives you time to come back. But just a quick word on the Planet Breaker Sun story. This story is very strange in a really good way. I'm not going to pretend I understand it. I think the protagonists live with their brains uploaded into a virtual world, and the real space that they're talking about is uh, a kind of an Earth that was destroyed, and so the protagonists, they're all Greek gods. They're floating around in a type of virtual world, and they go in and out of black holes. But how would you set up this novella, or this, is it a novella or is it a short story?
It's a novella. Yeah, it's about 22,000 words or so.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a post-singularity, post-human setting.
Mm-hmm.
The Earth is no longer inhabitable, so some millions of people got their brains or their personalities uploaded onto a spaceship, which is zipping around in space for no particular end other than just survival. And people don't just live in a virtual world; they sort of can create or co-create their own, and they are frequently connected. It's sort of about my experience with Tiny Muds back in the day, which were the sort of text-based Second Lives of the late '80s, early '90s, and how you'd
See?
have
Uh-huh.
different muds and mushes, and within a mud you'd have all sorts of issues with different topologies, some of which made very little sense, some of which were exactly like everyone did their college campuses. And you'd have people who were furries meeting people who were playing themselves, people who had their own characters, only spoken character, and all sorts of things like that. Except now it's basically us all the time in this future setting. And so there we got, they're also normal people, but some of them aren't people, but just the memories that other people have had of them stitched together to kind of emulate a personality.
Right, because
And this
that
is
is so awesome how you build that world. It's unclear who is just a memory of themselves. And then the
mhm.
kid, the Planet Breaker's son, is sort of glitching, I guess, between an 8-year-old and a teenager, and all the time. And it sounds like there's some sort of glitch, kind of like we're having now.
Mm-hmm. Well, they
Uh,
emulated some black holes, so should I cut off now and you'll do the reading?
Right, they go into a black hole. Okay, so I'm gonna set this up a little to give you ample time. We have a reading. Please reboot your whole machine. And my recommendation would be to just bring up Second Life, nothing else. Just Second Life, and then it should work. But reboot your whole machine. Like do a really hard restart on those pesky old Macs. Okay, and we'll see you in a few minutes. If you're just tuning in to the live stream, this is the Second Life Book Club, the first one of 2021. We are here, well, not right now, with Nick Mamatas, but Nick Mamatas will hopefully be right back. Nick Mamatas is quite an accomplished author and editor, and a Lovecraftian expert. If you don't know who H.P. Lovecraft is, we'll dive into H.P. Lovecraft more as well. We dive into his work that has inspired countless movies, games, authors, and we'll also dive into his racism, his misogyny, and we'll ask the big question: can we separate the art from the artist? Can we still enjoy Lovecraft and his work, all the while knowing that his convictions in life and his stance on important issues were, to put it mildly, quite horrible. We are also aware, I just want to say, we are aware of the situation in real life, and we are scared as everybody else, but we just what can we do? We're here in Second Life. We're discussing books, and interestingly enough, Nick's story, The Planet Breaker Sun, out from PM Press, January 21st, deals with, as he just said, people living in a type of virtual world, and the Planet Breaker Sun, the main protagonist, wants to go to real space, or does he? So in that story, in that novella, the realm of real space is mentioned, and the realm of real space holds a lot of appeal for the Planet Breaker's son. His parents are not so thrilled with him wanting to go there, and that is what the story evolves around. So, given the strange situation that we're doing a live show here in Second Life celebrating speculative fiction while the world is burning, what can I say? We'll talk to Nick about it, who also happens to be a political and social activist, and I'm sure he is quite eloquent on that matter, which will come up later in the hour. Now, we have a special reader, and the special reader is our Second Life Book Club drone. And I will pass the mic over to our Second Life Book Club drone to read an excerpt of The Planet Breaker's Son. Again, we're going to cut into the story where there is a dispute between the parents. We're not sure if the parents are uploaded, if they're simulated entities, okay, or if they are indeed uploaded and real representations of their former selves. And here the son, the Planet Breaker's son, is fighting with his mother about real space. And what else do I need to say to set it up? Oh yeah, the father's name is Zeus. And all the protagonists have the names of Greek gods. Here we go. Take it away, SL Book Club drone, Planet Breaker's son.
She wants to put me in one of her real space machines, cycle me through the system, and see what pops out. Don't call your mother she. She's standing right in front of you, said the Planet Breaker. Mom wants to kill me. I do not. The teen flickered out of existence, replaced by the familiar, younger Planet Breaker's son. His mother smiled at him and asked sweetly, would you like to sideload into real space? It'll be like with your dad. He took you to his work. I'll take you to my work, except my work is completely safe. The boy said, no, I know what's going to happen. I'll be a kid forever. I know it. I said so to me. It's not like that. It is. You'll erase me when I'm older, and I'll always be a little kid. I want to know what it's like to be 9 years old, then 10, then 15, and in that order. The Planet Breaker didn't know if he should even intervene. He smiled to himself. Until recently, his son kept to the usual fantasies kids have of eternal childhood. He'd be an astronaut out in real space, or a planet breaker, or a soccer coach married with kids, or part of some exciting polycule with various humanoid aliens, but always only himself, with his little face and outfits and intense interests in toys and games and dinosaurs, with occasional glances at grown-up literature that was over his head. Now, after a taste of being 5 foot something with teen levels of testosterone, the boy actually wanted to grow up, all the way up. That was something the Planet Breaker realized that he had never managed himself. You will, and you already have, baby, the Planet Breaker's wife said. That's where the big you comes from. All our trip to real space will do is make sure he comes when he's supposed to, and that you get to stay here with me and your father all the time until you grow up. There's a lot of yous, you know, the Planet Breaker said to his son. He had no idea if his wife's scheme would work, if going to real space would somehow stop the reticulation of his child, especially since it all seemed to boil down to the Planet Breaker's, implicit desires, but it was certainly worth a shot and could do no harm. It was best, he thought, to confuse the kid a bit, make him pliable. Every second you get rewritten, I get rewritten, your mom does, and the grass does, and the squirrels do. It was like trying to explain to a cat why she needed to get in her carrier and go to the vet. The Planet Breaker's son started reticulating quickly again, the boy crying and the teen snarling and spitting. No way, no way. Half a life is better than none. You'll have your time, said the Planet Breaker's wife. It's inevitable. Flowing through real space in one of the external vehicles is just a way to reset everything to the now vague and shouting blur. She was very good at keeping her calm with everyone, save her husband, that Planet Breaker's wife. Reset everything. Yes, that sounded like a good idea. Such a good idea, in fact, that when the sky turned red and the stars above went black and swole and turned into 10,000 grasping corpora of tentacles, bearing down toward his little home to tear it into its component subatomic particles, the planet breaker almost smiled.
And that was our SL Book Club drone. Big applause. Reading from the Planet Breaker Sun, and I should have emphasized this, that he does not want to go to real space, but then he goes to real space, and then it's all like, oh, I want to stay in real space. And so the cool thing here is that it's also a lot about the challenge, I guess, of parenting and the relationship of a child with their parents. And the cool thing is that the Planet Breaker at one point throws his son into a black hole, and then the glitch starts, and the glitch then is manifesting itself by the Planet Breaker son changing from 8-year-old to teenager. So that is one of those awesome plot points that is quite the, is it a metaphor or is it an analogy for a hormone-driven teenager that they sort of vacillate every 3 seconds. So in the book, it's literally every 3 seconds. If you're just tuning in, this is the Second Life Book Club, and our guest today is Nick Mamatas, who is just now coming back in. We have a full house here. We're here at the Floating Gallery of Books. It's a little bit downstairs from us. We're kind of in a crater. Have a lot of Lovecraftian things around, and that is because our guest today is obsession always has sort of a negative connotation. Our guest today is someone who is, as he put it earlier, fascinated by H.P. Lovecraft, and as soon as Nick is back with his voice, we can talk a little bit about H.P. Lovecraft, who he was. Are people familiar in the audience with H.P. Lovecraft? I'm going to just give a very, very quick biographical sketch. H.P. Lovecraft was an author of horror fiction, of weird fiction, as it was called at the time as well. His stories were published by several pulp magazines. He lived from 1890 to 1937. I actually have a bunch of pictures, but I up later. And he is most well known for his Cthulhu mythos. So the Cthulhu mythos basically says that there is a race of outer dimensional beings. And here's Nick. Nick, can you hear us?
Hello. Yes.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Welcome. Yes, welcome back. Welcome back. And now I'm going to turn it over to you. Can you give us a brief biographical, not so much biographical, what's the impact of H.P. Lovecraft for folks who are not familiar with his work? How would
H.P.
you
Lovecraft
describe him? Yes.
wrote for amateur presses and pulp magazines in the 20s and 1930s, and he was a unique figure in that at the time most pulp magazines were published stories that were very moralistic, or that had sort of a Judeo-Christian, to misuse a term that's always misused, sort of divine order to those stories, where if you were bad, something terrible happened to you. If you were good, you could be preserved. And Lovecraft had a more materialist philosophy, and so in his work, there was no actual divine order. There was an inversion of that.
Right. So there was chaos. So
or
basically,
negation of that.
right. Very good that you put this. I just want to see here in the chat we have Aquarius saying I like watching YouTubers play video games inspired by H.P. Lovecraft. So what you're saying is very important, that his significance was that in his stories there was no moral center. Why?
Mhm.
Why
Why
wasn't
was
there?
why did he write that way, or why? Well, there wasn't one because he didn't put anyone in. But it was his own vision of the world. He was terrified by life and the universe and everything. So he just found being alive kind of a bad experience for the most part. He had his fun here and there, but it seems that the themes he was trying to get at was trying to tell a new kind of story, a 20th century story, as opposed to a 19th century story. And once you've sort of tossed religion over, at least in his point of view, you were left with kind of this terror.
Mm-hmm.
But the terror was true because religion was false, and thus because of this materialist philosophy and and of course he was trying to write entertainment. He's trying to write scary stories. But what was scary was everything, the universe itself, and he had all these creatures and monsters, and it's today's called, as you were saying before I crashed out, the Cthulhu mythos. But it wasn't really a mythos. You can't really sit down and try to make sense of his different creatures and interdimensional beings and things that were just there for effect. And he'd recycle names to hint at or suggest at a larger story, but there wasn't really one there.
But it was really,
So
like you said,
author tried to put that story in together, though.
Mm-hmm. This is what I meant to say, is that it seems to me that his fear of life, the way he dealt with it was really kind of explain it through these other dimensional creatures that are waiting there to just tear everything down. But did he actually really believe in Cthulhu and the old ones coming back and stuff like that?
No, absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
No, he was. They were just funny names and intriguing character designs and that sort of thing. Of course, as we were talking about before, there was a whole genre of story where Lovecraft stories were really real, and Lovecraft really knew about it, and Lovecraft these things, and was trying to stop them, or is a victim of them himself. And I think part of that's because we know a lot about him, because he wrote many letters. He was a great correspondent. He's written over 100,000 letters to different authors and friends, and many of them were preserved. So we actually know a lot more about him than we do about other authors, because he wrote many more letters than he wrote stories. And so fans can tell you where he was in certain days, what was in his library, what his favorite ice cream was, how much his rent was, this kind of thing. We know everything about him. So it makes him easy to write about.
But still, people do believe, some of the fans and some of the fan fiction writers, and here I'm bringing up a Lovecraft photo here, and in the back, they do believe that he believed in it, right? I mean, is there a subcategory of writers who write in the Lovecraft tradition who believe that he believed in Cthulhu and big fishy looking monsters that are just waiting to take over the planet again, and who for them in thousands of years is just a second?
No, there's a subcategory of who, for philosophical and metaphysical reasons, pretend to believe that it's true in order to make it true.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's goofy bullshit, right? That's their thing. But no writer that I know of thinks that Cthulhu is real, or thinks that Lovecraft thinks Cthulhu. It's a frequent subject of stories, and also kind of a frequent joke. People may have heard of the famous book inside Lovecraft's fiction, the Necronomicon, which is not real, but it's always fun to pretend it has been real and try to hunt things down. And I think, was it Yale, that some fans have slipped a Necronomicon card into the old card catalog system at the Yale Library.
What?
To try to give it a hint. It was a joke, a prank, but back when there were catalogs by subject and author and whatnot, they typed one up for the Necronomicon by Al-Azif, the sort of an Arabian occult and more ancient occult truths in the Necronomicon, and put that in the card catalog.
You're breaking up a little bit, but we hear you okay. I just wanted to reiterate that the Necronomicon is a fictional book, just because maybe people here in the audience think like, oh no, it's not real, that Lovecraft made up, and it was written by the mad Arab, what was his name again? Al-Azif or
Al-Azif?
Al-Azif. And I, as a 13-year, or was I 14? I bought the Necronomicon from a mail order catalog, and I was actually sitting in my dad's attic with 3 or 4 of my friends trying out, and we were contemplating if we should do these magic sayings that were in the book. And some of my friends said no, because they will come back and they will break through the dimensions and they will come and get us. Now, maybe I was only 12, but I think I was 14, and there was a time where I truly believed that this book held spells that would bring back these monsters. Nick, are you shocked? A little bit.
Oh yeah, because it's like the Simon Amicon by Simon, right? That was one probably. And it was a mass market paperback that was about $4. So you would think, since they printed 100,000 of these things, and it's $4, that somebody would have done it before you got to it. Had it been real, right?
Listen, Nick. In Germany, it was more expensive. In Germany, it was about $6. So it must have been real. But anyway. Now, Misk Firethorn says in the chat, the Satanic Bible has a couple of ceremonies dealing with Cthulhu. Stella here says, would you say early horror writers overall, like Shelley, in addition to Lovecraft, inspired your stories? Maybe early sci-fi writers did not know what science might bring to the future. We'll talk about, Stella, please hold that question. We'll deal with it a little bit later. I want to very briefly, Nick, before we go to the next reading, because I want to do a reading from Wonder and Glory Forever. This is an anthology that is out now from Dover that you edited, and I think you do actually say that in the foreword of the story. Weird Tales by is it Michael Sisko? I don't know, but you actually say Lovecraft's goofy occult bullshit, and that's when I know that you you kind of see through that. But what is Lovecraft's the real issue about the man? Because a lot of people say we should not even say Lovecraftian horror anymore. We should say cosmic horror. We should really strip him of mentions, because why? Because he was a very problematic person, to put it mildly.
Sure. Yeah, he was incredibly racist, even for his era. He was considered, very racist among his audiences. He was an anti-Semite, a homophobe, and all these things. And really, he experienced negrophobia. It's not just racism of hatred or of wrong beliefs about superiority and inferiority. He was actually terrified of all others.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one reason. And it leads through in some of his themes and some of his stories. In fact, it's kind of odd, in that many pulp writers of the time were, of course, very racist or sexist, etc., and it was clear in their stories, and it weakens their stories. But because he was writing from this place of existential fear, it's more of a challenge to read and counter-read his work, because his terrible ideas kind of fuel the quality of the stories.
Right.
A secondary issue is that, of course, it is very easy to write a Lovecraft pastiche and have it be terrible, but find an audience for it. Throw in some tentacles, throw in a magic book, throw in some 17th century, 18th century obsolete terms, long run-on sentences, not a lot of dialogue, and you can have a passable pastiche. And a lot of Lovecraftian fiction, or, in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, is just like that. And
so he wasn't even a very good writer.
Imagine if there were... No. He was a very good writer. That's a mistake people make. He was a difficult writer. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he used different voices and a lot of different techniques in his work. People who do pastiches don't understand that, so they just take the most simplified version of it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of like having vampire novels. We have many vampire novels today, or told in a epistolary manner, like Dracula was, etc., and we call it Stokerism. Mm-hmm. And all the vampire stories that we really enjoyed over the past 50, 60, 70 years that are different than that wouldn't be here. And Lovecraftian fiction is kind of like that too, in that he so overwhelms this idea of cosmic horror or weird fiction that it is hard to find a territory inside weird fiction that is not influencing him certainly. That's another reason why we have to move away from Lovecraft, to try to find out what weird fiction can be. without out from under his shadow.
Mm.
So we have the political reason and the aesthetic reason for the late decision of Lovecraft.
So, in other words, we should. You were breaking up a little bit, but we should. He was instrumental, and we should keep his name associated with what he the genre that he kind of birthed.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. So I want to read from not I, but we have another actor who wants to read from your story in this really fantastic anthology, Wonder and Glory Forever. And your story is Farewell Performance, which is dedicated to Theodore Gottlieb. I didn't know who Theodore Gottlieb was, but I looked him up, and I brought a little picture as well. So real quick, set this up for us, please, Nick. Who was Theodore? Why did you dedicate this story to Theodore Gottlieb, and what's the story about?
Theodore Gottlieb is Brother Theodore. That's what he went by. And he was a sort of a stand-up comedian and performance artist and a writer. He was on David Letterman several times. He had a one-man show in the West Village of New York that lasted for years and years. And he was kind of a weird and existentialist. And I had the great opportunity to meet him several times in his final years. He was a very lonely old guy, and but I'd go there and play chess with his house and interview him, and I interviewed him a couple times and published some articles about him. And he's also an interesting figure. He was born in Germany. He was the son of a very wealthy Jewish family. He was imprisoned by Hitler in Dachau. His escape or his freedom from Dachau was engineered by Albert Einstein, who was having an affair with Gottlieb's mother. And that's how he got to America to become an actor. And he knew Orson Welles. He almost made it in many different ways. In many different times, he almost broke through to become a major figure, like a Peter Lorre type of actor or something like that. But always was under the surface. Mm-hmm. And after meeting him, it was really great to meet him and talk to him, become friendly with him. And it just struck me that if there were a time when the world was ending for these sort of weird and metaphysical reasons, wouldn't it be great if Brother Theodore gave one last monologue for humanity? That was the genesis of performance. Well, basically, I miss Brother Theodore. Mm-hmm. My motivation.
And he was he was a Holocaust survivor in that sense that he was certainly going to die, and that's a little bit in the theme of your story. And again, let me just say that the anthology, which is on the book stand now here in front of us, assembles extremely talented writers who not only throw tentacles around, but really know how to write. But there are tentacles in it too. So I would like to introduce our next reader, and I brought on one of the deep ones because Nick, you asked us kindly to provide people who can read, and so here he is, very 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 fishy, a fishy guy, and I hope that he can read this book. Have to adjust it a little bit and put the book stand right in front of him. And the funny thing is, this monster who is going to read from Nick's story, Farewell Performance, this monster actually also can read in Rillian dialogue. What is Rillian, Nick?
Oh, Rillian is an island. A sunken island on which Cthulhu, one of the major creatures in Lovecraft's bestiary, is sleeping and dreaming. And one day he'll wake up and eat everybody. He is kind of
Is that island off the coast of Santa Barbara, or where approximately? Do we know?
It moves around from story to story. It's not really he wasn't one of these people who was going to do a lot of world building and build a canon and build a universe. He just threw out stuff that he thought would be interesting for one story or so. But subsequently, people have tried, in a way, sort of like the Sherlock Holmes stories.
Right.
What's Watson's first name? Sometimes it's James, sometimes it's John. It depends. Where was he wounded in Afghanistan? Oh, sometimes his shoulder, sometimes his belt, his flank. And other writers would say, "Oh, I've got to fix this. I got to figure out what's going on with that bullet and what Watson's real name is." And the same thing has been preoccupying people.
This is hilarious. I would have imagined that Lovecraft would have a character Bible. Do we know that? Did he keep
No.
very, very consistent? He didn't, right? It was kind of like
The character Bible. That wasn't his interest. The interest was fundamentally unknowable. So yeah, if the island is there one time and an island is somewhere else another time, maybe there are two islands, maybe there's moving. It doesn't matter what's really happening. What matters is that we don't know what's really happening.
That actually
And so
strengthens
by
his
only
point,
getting
right?
hits, yeah.
Right. If he
Exactly.
had a character Bible, it would be way less scary because we kind of would see some sort of logic, I guess.
Yeah, like China Miéville said, once you give Cthulhu hit points and make him a character in the game, you lose what Cthulhu is.
I'm so glad you mentioned China Miéville. I have an announcement to make at the end of the show. But now let's move it over to our old fishy one, and he's going to read from Farewell Performance. This is about 6 minutes long. It's the beginning of the story, so enjoy. And Nick, if you disappear, just come back. Here we
got
go.
it. Okay.
Chesky was not nervous. He had his flashlight. He had a few things to say. The sky felt low to the ground, dark and hazy. People were coming too, and not too many. Chesky had spent a week putting up handwritten flyers. Skin flaked off the back of his hands like scales. He tried to make the flyers look professional. He kept it short, not like the ravings of so many other latter-day pamphleteers. Time is told by the setting of the sun every evening until he could perform no more. No admission charge, but trade goods greatly appreciated in the oldest part of the old town. Come and see, come and see. It was twilight, and when the last of the indigo was leached from the sky, there was enough of a crowd to begin. Chesky stepped into the corpse of a vehicle. Maybe it had been a very large SUV or a small armored personnel carrier, and smiled out at the small crowd. His clothes were comfortably loose, dark against darker. The roll of his belly hung over a well-beaten pair of slacks. Chesky turned on his flashlight. He stood up straight, his left foot ahead. He tilted the light under his own chin. There was a scattering of applause and of other sounds, flesh against flesh anyway, if not exactly palm against palm. "I am a failure," he said. "But it is the failure you should all fear. You must know this by now." He could barely see the audience. They looked like underfed trees, all white branch and bone. "But with every failure, my friends," Chesky said, "with every failure my plans come ever closer to fruition. My machinations are nearly complete." Chesky's voice was a growl from the diaphragm. He knew how to project. He picked the old parking lot because the ruined buildings surrounding it would help the acoustics, because they towered over the audience. "There aren't men surrounding you," he said, "ready to rain down bullets, fire bricks, dead cats ripe with buboes, letters by young women from all over this gray and ashen land that will break your very hearts." He swung the flashlight. Audience members flinched and flung up their arms to keep their eyes from the light. "Do not be afraid. All is proceeding according to plan. You and I, we're the lucky ones. We have a special mission. The human race, a group to which most of you belong," he stopped and waded through the titters, "exists on the edge of oblivion today. I am here today to speak of humanity, its prevention and cure." Chesky again swept the beam of the flashlight over the crowd. "Like most of you, I have two parents." He nodded to himself, then added, "Both of my parents died many years before I was born." Some of the crowd chuckled. "My mother hated me. My father, he was far kinder, a warm-hearted man. He only despised me. Let me tell you a story of my youth." Chesky lowered the flashlight. His feet were bare. He wiggled his toes as if waving with them to the audience. "On one bright day in the midst of winter, when the snow glistened on the streets like great piles of diamonds, my parents brought me before this old man. He was old enough to be my grandmother." He chuckled because nobody else did. Finally, someone snorted in support. And he told me the most horrid tale. When he was a boy my age, he lived in a camp. He was rarely fed. His parents were as thin as sticks. Men in uniforms ordered them about and threatened them with work and rifles. This boy had a job. There was a small stage made of scrap wood and a frame painted like a proscenium. With some scraps of cloth and burlap, he and a few of the other children were allowed to put on a puppet theater. It was a Punch and Judy show, he believed. He remembered only one routine. Jesky again brought the light to the underside of his chin. His eyes were wide. Punch threw his little baby, played by a dead and quickly rotting mouse, out the window, and the police were brought forth quickly to arrest him. The judge, another puppet, of course, perhaps even an entire sock, in order to present as regal a manner as possible, explained to Punch that he was to be hanged by the neck. Jesky raised his arms, his fists tight, until dead, 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 dead. Then he turned the light back onto himself, holding it arm's length, like a spotlight, like a firearm at his own head. Am I supposed to die 3 times? Punch asked in display. Jesky said, his voice a high squeak for Punch's sides. I don't know how to do that. And then this old man laughed and laughed and laughed. He looked down at me, his young grandson, and asked me a question when he saw that I was not smiling and laughing. Jesky shifted his weight to one foot and shrugged. An aside. I didn't want to interrupt him, you see. He asked me, do you get it? Again, Jesky pointed his light toward the crowd. Do you get it? Jesky sighed and let his arms fall limply at his sides again. I didn't get it. Jesky shrugged, as his grandfather once did. Well, the old man said to me, it was the Holocaust. I guess you had to be there. The audience laughed, though an undercurrent of boos reverberated across the scene as well. A rock clunked against the hulk on which Jesky stood. Another failure, he roared, the flashlight suddenly up again. Who was it? He pointed the flashlight at a member of the audience, a man with agitated flippers where arms once were. His face was narrow, too small for his flat head except for the nose, which was piggish. His eyes bulged from his head and glowed starry in the beam of Jesky's torch. It had to have been you. Who else wouldn't be able to throw a rock well enough to hit me? For a moment he turned the light off. The click was loud. You can try again if you like. Another rock did strike against something in the dark. Jesky yelped a comical "Owie!" and the audience laughed again. He turned the light back on. In his free hand he held a rock and dropped it against his makeshift stage. I could not help but notice that the universe is getting stupider, he said.
And that is another monster. Not another monster. This is the first. Whoa! I'm giving things away because Nick, we might have another reader here today. But yeah, so that's the beginning of Farewell Performance. And the universe is getting stupider. It's like if you're just tuning in, we're already racing towards the top of the hour. This is the Second Life Book Club, and our guest is Nick Mamatas. This edition, this anthology is out now, Wonder and Glory Forever. That it contains a story by H.P. Lovecraft, Shadow over Innsmouth, and it also contains a story by Clark Ashton Smith, who lived in the same town that I lived in for 15 years, and I drove by his house almost every day, and I had no idea that that was his house. If you look up Clark Ashton Smith and where his house is, then you know, you can't stalk me anymore because I don't live there anymore. But Nick, let's move quickly because we're coming up to the top of the hour. Let's move quickly to your story, your novel, your first novel, Move Underground, which I plowed through. What is the premise of Move Underground? You are why do you hate the beat poets? Well, first of all, who are the beat poets?
Well, I love the beat poets. Number one, I don't hate them. The beat movement, which was included, prose as well as poetry,
movement, yes.
yeah.
How
It was a post-war American
Sorry, go
post-war
ahead.
American, mostly American movement of post-World War II literary movement of people looking for direct experience of life without mediation and trying to capture that via text. And they were heavily integrated with each other. They had a social group. They published one another. They hang out with one another a lot. Jack Kerouac is probably the most famous beat novelist. Ginsberg, probably the most famous beat poet. And Move Underground is the beats in the Lovecraftian setting.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my abiding interests is cult fiction of all sorts, not just in science fiction, fantasy, and horror, or not just realist cult fiction, but all sorts of cult fictions. And for my first novel back in 2002, I thought, oh, what if I combine these two things? So many people love the beats, and so many people love H.P. Lovecraft. Everyone who loves them will buy this book.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, that was not the case. Because everyone who loved both of them would buy this book.
This is so funny because I mean this book is absolutely brilliant because I mean Jack Kerouac, as you mentioned, and I put up a picture in the back here. This is Jack Kerouac and Neil Cassidy, another one of the crew. Jack Kerouac's book On the Road is a well-known book that I haven't read, but I ordered it as soon as I read yours. I was aware of the book, but that's one of the things that you're aware of and that I didn't read, but that's the tone you're kind of replicating, and the beat poets were rebelling against the culture of the post-war America, and as I read your book and I dove deeper into where they ended up. I mean, Neil Cassidy died early on, but some of the others, they were totally absorbed by the culture that they were critiquing. I mean, this is not unique to this movement, but they were pretty much absorbed, and Jack Kerouac also was kind of a staunch anti-communist. And so when I read your book, I really read this as the aspect of them rebelling against the Cthulhu monsters, against the Lovecraftian monsters. The Lovecraftian monsters were the stand-ins for the, I guess, the conservatives, or the conservatism in U.S. culture,
or conformity.
Conformity.
Let's say,
uh-huh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But they became very conformed themselves later on, right?
To a certain extent, Kerouac became a right-wing crank and got on television complaining about the hippies and things like that. And Ginsberg always stayed pretty left. And William S. Burroughs was heavily wrapped up in his own drug culture. You know, there's a famous anecdote where he's at Studio 54. Of course, it's not a radical place. The famous disco. Introduced to the police, you know, Sting and the other people in the police. And he says, oh, hello to them. And he runs over to his friends and says, if anybody's holding, throw it in the toilet and throw it in the toilet and flush it because the cops are here. So he had no idea who the police were a band. He just thought he was being introduced to the NYPD, who were here to like bust him for drugs. That's how out of it he was in the 70s.
So we have William Burroughs.
You can follow your follow your aesthetic agenda to the ends of the world, or right up your own ass if you. And they all did.
Mm-hmm. And they were all different. Jack Kerouac came from a fairly normal family. Neil Cassidy, who is not pictured here on this picture, was always in trouble with the law early on. Was in jail very often, and then I guess as they became older, they kind of diverged into and kind of were absorbed back into the class that they kind of came from in a way. But that's kind of all in your book. I mean, not foreshadow, but the book is about Jack Kerouac actually writing this book. I mean, you write in his voice as he is leaving California because California is disappearing because Cthulhu is coming back. You know, the Cthulhu, the island of R'lyeh that we mentioned earlier, comes back from underneath the ocean, and California is nuked away, and he drives off to meet with Neil Cassidy and the others to kind of fight the monsters, right?
In a way, one interesting thing that happened is that in real life, Kerouac was a pacifist, and I wrote the book and had all these things happen, and then a friend of mine said, you know, Kerouac was a pacifist. How do you get around that? I reread the book and said, oh, as a matter of fact, it's everybody else who does all the fighting and combat and deals with it. Carrick sort of just narrates and runs away, or he has a pistol and you can't use it because he's terrified of it. So even though I hadn't planned in advance to make him a pacifist, in the book I just happened to, from my reading of Kerouac informing my writing of the book. So I was pretty happy that just sort of came out, that I got him authentically enough that he acted the way he would have acted without me thinking, oh, I better make sure he acts without violence.
Awesome, and we're gonna hear a little reading from it, and again, Nick, I mean, my hat is off. The funny thing, I mean, this book came out in 2004, and it starts with Jack Kerouac in Big Sur, when Cthulhu rises again. I was in Big Sur exactly around the same time. I was looking over the Pacific Ocean. I didn't see any Cthulhu rising. I just want to say that I enjoyed this book tremendously without being too familiar with Jack Kerouac's voice, because I haven't read On the Road, and I think that's a major accomplishment. I just want to mention there's a musical band called Beatniks. They play Metallica songs merging with the Beatles sensibility. So this is kind of, I think, what you accomplished there is what they have accomplished in musical terms. Check them out. So you did an awesome conceit here, merging these the Jack Kerouac world and the Lovecraftian world. So we have a short reading, and that closes us out in the hour. Let me see if our reader is ready. I hired another reader, a Dagon. What is Dagon? Nick, do you know?
Like a sea god. I think he is a historical sea god, like a Sumerian sea god or something that the name has been.
Yes, actually,
used.
that I didn't know. He was a Sumerian god, but then Lovecraft took that and
I know other writers before that too. Yeah, like I think Robert W. Chambers wrote about Dagon, and Lovecraft also did that sort of thing. So here he is. He's stepping on me.
Oh my God. I'm sorry, he's stepping on you. Well, they're not very well behaved, these old
I
ones.
deserve it, I'm sure.
Okay, so now we're going to hear a short excerpt, and I rehearsed this, and there's a little jazz music underneath it too, to kind of give it a little pizzazz. And the reading is a little fast. It's about 3 minutes long. So let me set it up real quick. They're driving. Jack Kerouac is driving here in this scene with William S. Burroughs, and they're talking, or he's talking about the fact that stopping at a rest stop might be problematic, right? Might be dangerous. And so this is where we're cutting in, where Jack is talking about the danger of the rest stops, because of course Cthulhu has taken over America, and am I setting this up right, Nick? That's why we shouldn't stop at rest stops. I mean, it's really the cult has taken over, and they need to get to New York as fast as possible. Why do they need to go to New York to kill the head of the cult, or to mitigate the situation?
Well, there's a well, on some level, it's just On the Road in reverse, where On the Road starts in New York and they go to California. So they're trying to undo On the Road by reversing everything. But also, there's another elder being old one, called Azazel, who is in conflict with Cthulhu for some reason, some cosmic reason we can't possibly understand. And he's based in New York. So the country's being squeezed between its coasts.
Azathoth is it? Oh my God, this stuff is really difficult to pronounce. Azathoth. Sure. So Azathoth is fighting against Cthulhu. Hmm? Oh wow! So we're learning a lot here, folks. While the real world, the real space is burning, the world of the deep ones burn as well. So here is a little excerpt from Move Underground. And again, this is Jack Kerouac riffing on the danger of being on the road. Okay, here we go.
There were rest stops on the highway, but on this fatal plane we have to be careful. Slow down when we see one on the highway, try to spy with my third little eye the taint of extra-dimensional evil, but then it may already be too late. Grease monkeys swarming on our car, smashing the windows with tire irons, dragging us into the local diner for deep frying. So, no, you don't slow down at the first truck stop you see. That's where they're waiting. But you don't just zip past it either, not when your pickup is already coughing out black exhaust. The beetle men behind the counters are a pear-shaped goblin waitress peeking through the Venetian blinds in a little side window spot you have dead on the road, acting all casual, and call ahead to the next rest stop. Pull in there, fast or slow, and they're waiting for you. All smiles, all lips twisted and hardened into thick, chitinous hooks. All service too, sure. Fill the tank, have a cup of joe, on the house even, with 2 lumps of sugar, 1 for the coffee, 1 for the gas. Then 3 miles down the road, when the truck wheezes and fails just over the horizon, we come for you, drag you out of the cab, splice your vocal cords, and listen and laugh as we drag you over the hot asphalt back, not to their stop, but to the one before. What's left of Jack and Bill, bloody and stained roadkill, served up as Sunday hash in 2 different diners. Maybe the third stop if you have enough gas, because you sure as hell don't want to be walking the shoulder alone with nothing but an empty gas can. If this purloined jalopy even has a gas can, because you won't even be able to throw a punch before they get you. That third rest stop, you don't slow down. You blaze on in, tires squealing and red hot. You grab the gas quick at gunpoint if you have to, if guns even work on these shambling monsters, and shove a wedge of apple pie in your mouth, roll out on the bill and hit the road before the cops or great tentacles made of bright noonday sky itself come to claim your soul. There's a rest stop, Bill said. I slowed down and pulled in without incident and haggled for some gas. The gasman was a good old boy who'd seen better days. He had a Bible in one hand, a whittling knife in the other, and was just leaning and looking, his eyes little pebbles. I walked right up to him and told him that I'd stolen the car, that I was a great, horrible beatnik, and that if I didn't get to New York and soon like the stars would align and the world would be consumed by great Cthulhu, or maybe just destroyed by Azathoth. Have you been washed in the blood of the Lamb, he asked. Have you been slain in the Spirit? Sure! What else can you say to that? And there was that one time when a hobo preacher laid hands on me and I whooped it up for nearly an hour in the grasp of some golden fist, though that could have been a parlor trick. I meditated for days after, searching for that elusive clump of nerves or spiritual door that would make it happen again. But I never found it, except in the ticky-tack of the underwood. Anyway, we really needed gas, and the fellow liked Bill's watch, so we filled the tank in 2 5-gallon tanks we found in the back of the truck, plus a redneck blessing written into the dust on our hood with his finger. There were rest stops.
Oops. That was a very nice reading, Dagon. Thank you so much. You may go now. And that's from Nick's debut novel, Move Underground. Nick, this was translated in German too. I mean, I cannot really say if it's a good translation or not. You don't really like translations.
No, I love translations. What are you talking about?
I'm reading you wrong.
I
You said translations in that interview in Planet Breaker's Sun. You said something to the effect that translations are not, can never be accurate, which is of course true. How should we deal with translations?
Only by knowing that they're never going to be accurate, but also not by surprising accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, as a writer, I want, if a book is translated into German, I want it to be changed a little bit to fit a German sensibility, to be immediately apprehendable to a German-speaking audience. I don't want them to try to destroy quality by keeping it accurate. And, you know, I work in translation now. I worked at Viz Media, helping translate Japanese fiction. I've helped my friend translate some Korean nonfiction. I'm now working at a company called Seven Seas, where we're also working on Japanese manga. And translation is difficult because there's always that tension between fidelity and a more thematic literary translation. And my emphasis is always on the latter. But there are many people who say, oh, you changed something, you took out a sentence. Well, yeah, the sentence was rhythmically important in Japanese or German or whatever, but superfluous and confusing in English. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, we just have to understand that when we're reading translated work, it's going to be different. And there are some things that make more sense in the translated language. One of the last books I edited for Viz was called Sisyphean by Dempo Tirashoma and Torjima, rather. Sorry. And that book is really intensely new weird. He was really inspired by the Mievils and Jeff Vandermeers and whatnot, and deals a lot with Japanese folklore, but also far future post-human, but not post-biology dystopias. And when my boss, who's Japanese, a Japanese immigrant, read the English translation, said, "Oh, now I get it. Now I understand the book."
That's amazing.
Yes.
Wow. I mean, to me, as someone, I speak English and German, I always try to read both. Matt Ruff, who's one of my favorite contemporary writers, I read his German translations are incredibly good, and the Move Underground translation is by Joachim Körber, who translates all the Stephen King books. That it's incredibly good. I mean, the rhythm, he really gets it, and some of the, the cup of Joe, for example, in this excerpt, there's a German term for bad coffee, or bad gas station coffee, and it's called a Muckefuck. Okay, sorry, that was not a swear word, but I mean, these little subtleties, it's incredibly enjoyable. We're totally over the hour. I have so many more questions. We're going to do a little post game. I'm fascinated by your influences as well. I was going to ask if the beat poets, well, they obviously influenced, right? Or was this just sort of the exercise was sort of like enticing to you here with Move On?
No, they're huge
Exercise.
influences. They're huge influence on me. Even in both in matters of prose and also in just in matters of what would you like to be a writer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay to be a writer and also live in a hovel? Yes, which is good because that's what I do. And so they had a different kind of vision of how to orient creative work in your life than other writers. And that's always been pretty interesting to me. And I like reading their biographies and hearing about them. I wrote a letter recently to try to get a name of a park in San Francisco changed to Dan de Prima Park. So I'm heavily interested in the beats and all sorts of fiction. I have pretty eclectic influences, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Let's go to post game and talk a little bit more about that. Nick, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's really, I mean, we just scratched the surface. I also want to emphasize that PM Press, who published your latest, well, it's not out yet, on the 21st, Planet Breaker Sun, they have one of those subscription models, which I find extremely interesting. I am a member of another UK-based publisher, and I have to look at my finances, but I might get over to pmpress.org. I'm putting the link in the local chat. So PM Press is a publisher of independent publisher, radical independent publisher, in the sense that they are striving for a more just society that needs to be radically implemented in many ways. Radical does not mean violent, by the way, in case you want to send me hate mail, or not, it does not necessarily mean that. So please do support those guys. And thank you to my wonderful team. Thank you, Strawberry. Thank you, Silas Merlin, Kralos for the avatars, Marianne McCann, Arietu, Arduin, all the people who make this possible and customize the venue. Next week is our guest will be Samit Basu from India, and he will tell us a whole bunch of war stories of being an Indian speculative fiction writer, the adventures of publishing, and as about chosen spirits is pretty awesome, and that is next week. And so we'll cut the stream now, and I'll ask the folks to stick around, and we can ask Nick a few questions. Thank you, wonderful audience, and I'll see you next week, 12 o'clock Wednesday.